Hey guys, welcome to the Flipped Classroom 2.1, The French and Indian War. Remember, when you're doing a flipped classroom, that you need to be taking Cornell notes along with listening to this lecture. There might be more than one part to this lecture, so always look in the flipped classroom area of our class website and make sure you've listened to all the videos that you are supposed to. No video lasts longer than 15 minutes. This particular lecture will have 7 questions in it. So before you think you're done, make sure you have all 7 questions written down on your Cornell notes. However many parts that might make up. This is the beginning of the lecture, so I don't know how many parts it's going to be yet, but hopefully just 2, I'm thinking. So we'll see how it goes. If you haven't done it already, you need to write down that the title of your notes is 2.1, The French and Indian War. During flipped classroom lectures, don't forget that if I am ready to move on, I'm going to give you the signal by telling you I'm moving on to the next slide. And if you're not ready yet, you can always push pause and finish writing whatever you need to write down before you move on to the next slide. All right, you should have your title down. Don't worry about the EQs. They're there if you guys need them for reference. But at the moment, we are moving on. All right, so let's talk about France for a minute. We've talked about France in class a few times. As you guys know, they're one of the big 3 that have territory in the New World. There was England, who we've been focusing on, also known as Britain for our purposes. There's France, and there's Spain. We're not going to really deal with Spain today, but let's focus on France for a minute. France owns the land right next door to the 13 colonies. All right, it will be what will become the middle of the United States is the land that France owns, that middle chunk. They also own quite a large chunk of Canada. So if you take a look at the map over here on your PowerPoint, you can see that the 13 British colonies are in pink and that the French territory right next door is in that yellow, taking up area that will become the future United States as well as some territory in Canada. All right. So here's the deal. As you might remember, the French had always been super friendly for the most part with the Native Americans throughout the New World. They left them alone. They did not have goals of really turning their land holdings in the New World into major cities and settlements. They just had a successful fur trading industry going in the New World. And so it just consisted of some frontiersmen type people, sometimes families, often just men out there doing fur trapping and fur trading with the local Native American groups. It was quite profitable for France, and the Native Americans liked it because they did not really have their eyes set on, again, setting up major cities or changing the Native Americans' way of life. All right, so things have been rolling along just dandy until in the 13 colonies, we've been expanding. The population's exploding. We need more room, or at least we think we do. So colonists start making their way west, okay, into disputed territory between the French and the British. If you look at your map again, there's this section here that is called the Ohio River Valley area, partially in the fact that this part of this right here is the Ohio River, okay? And this area that has these stripes going through it is the disputed area of land. The French say they own it, but the British say they own it, all right? And so this is in dispute at the time that these events are happening in the 1750s. And so what happens is the British decide to start moving westward and settling in that Ohio River Valley area. And the French are not happy, okay? The French have a very profitable fur industry, like we discussed, and this is upsetting the balance of their profits and their relationships with the natives, and they want the English out. They're not happy that they're settling here. Plus, they think from their side of things that this is in fact French territory, and the British should not be settling in it anyway. All right, so make sure you highlighted your Q1 France with your yellow highlighter and anything that was in purple with your super duper very important highlighter color. All right, if you're not ready yet, push pause because here we go. Throughout this presentation, there are a few different places where there are video clips for you guys to watch. I'm not going to play them within the presentation, but they are there for you on the website next to this very video that you clicked on to watch this presentation. I recommend you watch any video clips I post along with a flipped classroom lecture, because a lot of times, you guys, extra credit questions as well as regular test questions and helpful hints and stuff for projects you guys will be doing come from the video clips. So don't ignore them, okay? Just because you're at home, I'm watching you. Push it. Watch the clip on Fur Trade. You know you want to. All right, so push pause if you need to and go ahead and watch that Fur Trade clip. And when you're ready, come on back and we'll keep going. If you didn't do it yet, draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page, because here we go with question number 2. All right, question 2, the beginning of war. Write it down and highlight it yellow. Okay, so here's the deal. The French think that that disputed territory is theirs, and the British have been settling on it to the dismay of the French. They're not happy, okay? And so tensions are already high, right? Well, then the French build a fort on that disputed territory. And so from Britain's point of view, they're like, wait a minute, why are the French building a fort here? This is our land, says the British, even though the French disagree, right? So the French build a fort, and Britain's not happy. So they decide to send a very young, and I know this is hard for you guys because all of you always picture George Washington as an old dude with white hair already, but you know, he was once a young man too. So this is back before we are a United States. He's not been president yet. He's not an old guy yet. You know, he's a young lieutenant in the British, which at the moment is the good guys from our perspective, not French's perspective, but from our perspective, okay, remember, we're Team Britain at the moment, all right? So a young Lieutenant George Washington with some troops are sent into that area to go check out this French fort and see what the deal is with them building on what we consider our land. And so George goes and checks it out, and poor Georgie, he gets his butt kicked at this fort. Even though they were just there to kind of see what was what, a battle ends up ensuing, and the French pretty much wipe the floor with George Washington and his men. George Washington is even kidnapped during this event. Okay, eventually he is let go. Obviously they don't kill him or do anything, or we wouldn't have had the first president of the United States be George Washington, right? But he is kidnapped. Eventually he's let go. However, this event, George Washington just going to check the fort out, but then being attacked by the French and then getting kidnapped and stuff, this is going to set off the chain of events, hint, hint, wink, wink, that's going to start the French and Indian War. All right. Side note, so you guys understand this in the big picture of things, okay? Americans call this war the French and Indian War because from our perspective, who we end up fighting are the French and some of the Native American tribes that fight with the French. However, from the world's perspective, this actually sets off a chain of events that affects multiple countries around the globe, because France and England over in Europe, okay, they start conflicting with each other because of what's happening here in the colonies and go to war with each other, and other countries end up getting dragged in and different things happen. And this war ends up lasting for 7 years, starting in 1756 and going through January of 1763. So through the rest of the planet, they consider this war the 7 Years' War. So when you hear 7 Years' War, it's the same thing from the American perspective as talking about the French and Indian War. It's just that the French and Indian War kind of focuses specifically on just the events in the colonies and, you know, the American colonists, not necessarily the global view of the rest of the war and other countries and other things going on. All right, so make sure you highlighted your title in yellow and anything important with your super duper very important highlighter color. All right, and draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. And if you're not ready, push pause, because here we go. Okay, so who's involved in this war anyway? Go ahead and put Q3, groups involved, and highlight it yellow. All right, we've got three main groups involved. One being, of course, the English, which again, for our purposes, are also known as the British. So the English or the British, which remember is us at this point. We are not Americans yet. We're the American colonists because the territory is called America, but we don't consider ourselves Americans. We are still British or English, okay? So there's us. So our side, English, British side, involves British soldiers sent over from England, as well as American colonists helping the British cause. Go Team Britain. Okay. There's also obviously the French, okay, who also send soldiers over to the New World. So there's French soldiers involved, as well as some of the fur traders and the colonists that were living in French territory over in the New World that get involved. Okay. Then the third group that gets involved is Native Americans. For the most part, big surprise, most natives will side with the French because historically speaking, the French had been so much nicer to natives than the British had been, as we've discussed lots of times in class. Okay. However, there are a few tribes that do end up fighting for Team Britain, okay, including the Iroquois League, which is made up of several different Indian tribes. Okay, so that's who's involved in the fighting. Go ahead and make sure you've got that all written down. Draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. And if you're not ready, push pause, because here we go. Okay, FYI, you don't have to write this down, but you do want to know this information, so pay attention. Something occurs during the French and Indian War that is a first for the American colonies, and that is that they decide they want to brainstorm, they want to plan, they need a plan of attack, right? So for the first time ever since they have been invented, the 13 colonies come together to meet and discuss plans about how to beat the French and how to deal with the natives that are against their cause without the official English presence being there. So this is going to be the first thing that kind of gives them a common cause, because now, us being the United States of America, you guys, we always think of America as united and we're all together. They did not have that vision back then. They were like 13 separate little countries pretty much. They often did not, have very much to do with each other. They did not consider themselves united. They were 13 very separate territories with different things going on. But this gave them a common cause. So this is going to be the first time they really come together as a unit. And the plan that they discuss is something called the Albany Plan of the Union, which is the brainchild of the one and only Benjamin Franklin. Okay? And so it involves several different strategies and stuff and how to win the French and Indian War. And there is a political cartoon graphic over here, the snake cut up into several pieces, that many of you at some point in time have probably seen before. That is actually Benjamin Franklin's little handiwork there in that drawing. And the point of the snake is, if you look at it, it has the abbreviations of the different states or colonies at this point, okay? And pretty much, hey, join or die, right? Because if you cut a piece off the snake, it's not going to be good anymore. The snake needs to work together as a whole. All the parts throughout a snake are important for it to function, right? So it was a political cartoon expressing the importance of uniting together and showing a united front in this French and Indian War effort, okay? Again, remember that most natives are definitely going to side with the French. It just makes sense. The French has always been a lot nicer to them. However, again, you do have some Indians willing to help out the British Team Britain cause, mostly the Iroquois League, which is made up of several different tribes. All right, so again, you have to write that down, but you do want to kind of soak that in, take that in for a second, and push pause if you need to read it again, because here we go. All right, the war. Okay, so the beginning of the war is French victory after French victory after French victory, okay? They are wiping the floor with us. But what happens over time is, somebody's military command, their term has ended. They get to go back to France, and new leadership is, getting shipped in. And over time, as leadership changes for the French And as they start to argue over fighting styles, because the natives want to fight one way, the French have a different way that they want to fight, and arguments ensue about how to do this, they end up really affecting France and their ability to keep that winning momentum going forward. So eventually, Team Britain, which is us right now, we end up ultimately getting the victory. I'm going to stop there and we'll finish this up with the next recording. So go ahead and go to part 2 right now.